Hi, everybody. This is SAAD. Returned this morning from a departmental meeting and taking a bit of a break before I resume my punishing work schedule. I thought I would just share with you a very, very small snippet of the extraordinary number of messages that I receive from people who are simply unable to process their exposure to the infinite darkness, the abyss of infinite lunacy. And so oftentimes I read the actual emails that I receive, but here I'll just summarize a few for you. And again, you cannot imagine the number of such messages that I receive in a day, which again, I'm humbled and delighted that people trust me with this information. But as you might imagine, it can be truly exhausting to see the extent to which we are galloping towards the land of no return. So in one case, a doctoral student in cultural anthropology from Europe writes to me completely confused about something that I actually talk about in my forthcoming book, the indigenization of knowledge, the idea that, there are different ways of knowing, and the scientific method is just one of many ways of knowing. No, it isn't. You could be from an indigenous ancestry whereby your peoples have lived in a particular ecosystem so that you have content-specific knowledge about that flora and fauna. That's perfectly fine. But the manner by which you test ideas, there is no Lebanese Jewish epistemology. There is no trans person of color epistemology. There is no indigenous epistemology. There's the scientific method and only that. So that was one example. Another case, a neuroscience student from Australia wrote to me because he was engaging another student on one of the social media platforms about this concept of white toxicity. Everything that's bad in the world is started by white people. And he was challenging this idea. And his friends, the other student with whom he was exchanging, debating, his professor, or his or her professor, I don't remember the sex of the person in question, got in and started basically berating the student who wrote to me regarding his resistance against the notion of white toxicity, and then he pulled rank. I have a PhD in this. I know better than you. You're just a little schmuck. Shut up. Then I had a Coptic Christian woman who moved to Canada about 20 years ago, who is very, very concerned about the increased Islamization of Canada, whereby she pointed to the fact that she used to never see a single veiled woman, whereas now she can't walk 2 meters without seeing veiled women everywhere. Which of course struck me as a surprise, because wherever Islam goes, there is an increase of freedom for women, for gays, for Jews. So I'm not really sure what she was concerned about. But anyway, she wrote to me that she was very concerned about that. And then finally, the fourth story, and again, let me reiterate, this is a unbelievably small tip of the iceberg of the messages that I receive. But I just want to give you a sense of the despair that people are feeling. I received a message from a student or former student who's no longer matriculating at that university, who receives a letter from his dean telling him that this is, I think, a year after the fact. The student is no longer in the program. The dean tells him that he'd like to set up an appointment with him because he is concerned that some of his social media content is problematic. And apparently, some of the problem stems from the fact that this former student, who's no longer a student, who is sharing content on his personal, I think, Facebook page, dared to do the following. You ready? He shared some of my content. That's something that should get every dean at every university concerned. I mean, what kind of monster would share Dr. Gad Saad's content? A guy who defends the right of women in the Middle East, the rights of LGBTQ community in the Middle East, the guy who is a free speech absolutist, the guy who believes that identity politics is a cancer and we should judge the merits of every individual based on their merits and flaws. What kind of monster would share such content? So this dean felt it appropriate to write to a former student about the fact that he is sharing objectionable content on his social media, whereby some of his objectionable content, or some of the objectionable content, is supposedly, I'm guessing, sharing my material. I don't think the dean referred to me specifically, but the former student in question said, the only stuff that I could imagine is, quote, objectionable is that I share some of your content and some comedy stuff. So remember, folks, if you don't want to hear back from a former dean, don't you dare share anything of SAAD. That would be problematic. This is the world that we are increasingly living in. This is the world where everyone is now afraid to utter a single word out of place. I live in that ecosystem. And I live in that ecosystem as a bull in a china shop, walking around unconcerned with these issues. And let me tell you, there's a lot of pressure in fighting against these regressive ideas. If you appreciate what I do, and if you support what I do, then please consider supporting this channel in every possible way that you can. You can share this content. You can tell others about it. You can compel others to subscribe to the channel. I've got a Patreon account, a PayPal account, a Subscribestar account. Anything that you can do to support me and others who are at the front lines trying to fight for your children to grow up in environments where they are free to pursue anything that they want, say whatever they want, unencumbered by the thought police, the language police. Oh, speaking of language police, when you are now in Massachusetts, you might want to be careful to never utter the word female dog. You know, the word that starts with B. I don't want to say it because I don't want to be censored. This is what is happening to our society. It's drip, drip, drip. It's death by 1,000 cuts, but it's happening. And if you think that it doesn't concern you, wait tomorrow when you are forced to go to mandatory training at your organization. Have a great weekend, everyone. Don't think that just because it hasn't hit you yet, you shouldn't be concerned with it. Don't think that because others are fighting on your behalf, you shouldn't be speaking using your own voice. Don't sit idly. Get engaged. Get off the couch. Use your voice. Cheers, everybody.